So we're going to do a transmission service on a 1995 tranny, E4OD, attached to a Ford 460 in my 1995 Damon RV. So we're going to do this without getting transmission fluid all over ourselves. So we'll talk about how to attach a hose and pump it out before we drop the pan. We're going to locate the transmission return line, coolant line on the back of the transmission. We're going to need a 3/8 inch hose, a hose clamp, and a 1/2 inch wrench to do that. So I've located the coolant return line to the transmission on the back and disconnected it with a 1/2 inch wrench. It's a 3/8 inch hose, clear hose that I've attached so I can pump the transmission before taking off the pan. I'll run it out to a 5-gallon bucket with a clip on it, and we'll start the engine and run it for about 30 seconds and pump out about 4 or 5 quarts. So we ran the motor for about 30-40 seconds, and there was plenty of time to watch the fluid go in the bucket. So what you saw there in that last little clip was about 35-40 seconds worth, pumping just until we saw a little air. It looks like 4 or 5 quarts, so we should be ready to drop the pan.
So the bolts on this E4OD are 1/2 inch, and I've loosened all the bolts, and I'm going to start taking a pan off. I've removed all but 2 of the bolts. I'm getting ready to drop the pan. It did say metric on this, and it was a 10mm socket instead of a 1/2 inch, as I suspected. It was a 1/2 inch wrench to take the coolant line off. So it appears that we're ready to take the pan off. I've got 2 bolts. I'll hold it up with one hand and we'll see what happens. Hopefully I won't get drenched. Well, I dropped the pan, and you can see because of the light here on the other side, but there's stuff dripping out. I just let the pan sit right under the tranny and catching any of that extra oil. We'll let that sit for a little bit.
So while I'm waiting for that to finish dripping into the pan, I went ahead and opened the filter kit and inspected it. It looks like the appropriate gasket, which I don't really need to change. I'm in the 1995, so it's like 89 to 95. You change the gasket after 95. They're reusable, but I bought the kit anyway, so most of the time you don't have to change the filters, but I don't know how long this one's been in there, so we'll go ahead and change that out as well. One thing that was in the reading was to, when you remove the old filter, to make sure that that little rubber grommet oil seal on the filter comes out. Sometimes it's still up there, so we'll make sure that we do that as well. Now I'm getting ready, and I'll pull out that pan. We'll see how much oil was in the bottom of it. See, there was some oil in there. Some of that came out of the filter, but with just the 2 bolts and then take them out slowly and letting the pan come back down all the way, I did not have to get drenched in oil. So what we'll do is pour this in our 5-gallon bucket and then remeasure and see how many quarts we've actually taken out. Well, I've dumped the oil out, and the bottom of the pan, there'll be a magnet. I couldn't see it at first, but here it is with all of that old sludge on it. Looks like it probably hasn't been serviced in quite some time. So we get all of that cleaned up and out of there, and go from there.
we'll remeasure our oil here and see how much we've actually taken out. You can see the shadow on the book. It looks like, oh, it might be a third of the bucket, but I'll measure it with a tape measure, and then it's a 5-gallon bucket. So I've measured with a tape measure up 5 inches and 15 inches tall, so roughly 1/3 of 5 gallons. So call it 18 quarts. 1/3 of 18 is 6 quarts, a little bit more. So we'll be adding 7 quarts when we put this all back together, and then we'll continue the flushing process after that. After we get the pan cleaned up and back on, we'll go from there. So you can see that there's a lot of fines that have been caught on this magnet, and we'll get that all cleaned up. Pretty old looking stuff, but that's what it's there for. So we've got the pan all cleaned up, and that's what the magnet actually looks like when it's clean. So we'll go under there and pull that filter off, and then we'll put the gasket on here and reattach. So I've got the old filter off, and as you can see, it's got the rubber seal with it. You might hold it tilted a little bit or oil will come out, so we'll dump the rest of this oil out here. Looks like maybe another quart or so. And we'll remeasure our oil here and see how much we need to put in after we put this pan and new filter on. Was checking out the cover of the solenoid pack, and the black cover was brittle and cracked, so I'm checking in to see if that's a functional thing or not. We'll go from there.
So I've put the pan back on, and well, I put the filter on and then I put the pan back on, got everything torqued down, and we're going to continue pumping about 30-40 seconds, checking the oil, adding a little bit more until we get this done with about 19 quarts in our bucket and 19 quarts back in the tranny. We'll go through each of the gears a couple times, 5 seconds a gear as we're doing one of the runs, and that'll get everything out of the torque converter and all of the gear mechanisms.
So I just added about 7 quarts of Max Life. It's a fully synthetic automatic transmission fluid, and so we estimated that we'd taken about 7 quarts out, but it's okay to have a quarter extra, because now what we're going to do is we're going to start the motor again and pump a little bit more fluid out of the torque converter, and until we get it up to about 18-19 quarts, or I see a change in color, and we'll go from there. I'm waiting to hear back on the cover for the overdrive unit. It don't appear that it has any functionality other than a cover, so we'll see. So I put in 18 quarts, and now I'm just waiting for the last quart that I put in to settle down. I'll check the dipstick and see what it says before I take this hose off. So the almost 18 or 19 quarts, it looks like it's been pumped out, so looking good. Just finished up. Took the hose off, put everything back together, and I've got pretty clean oil in the last bit of the line. So I put a little bolt in the end of it when I drug it out so it didn't get fluid all over. And darn near 19 quarts. Now I'm going to run it for a while and then I'll check the oil and top it off. Ta-da! All done.